Welcome to the Reddit Recap, your go-to source for the latest and greatest stories from Reddit. I'm your host Dave, and I'm excited to be your guide on this journey through the best of what the internet has to offer. Each week, we scour the depths of Reddit to bring you a curated selection of the most interesting and engaging threads, covering everything from heartwarming tales to viral memes, and everything in between. With insightful commentary, high-quality visuals, and a healthy dose of humor, we're here to keep you entertained and informed about what's happening on the front page of the internet. So sit back, relax, and get ready to dive into the wonderful world of Reddit with us. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest content. Let's get started. The sun shone down on the rolling hills of the English countryside, bathing everything in a warm, golden light. In a small village nestled amidst the greenery, there lived a boy unlike any other. His name was Sherlock Holmes, and even at the tender age of 10, he possessed a mind that was sharp, curious, and endlessly inquisitive. It was the height of summer, and the whole village was buzzing with excitement. The annual fair was about to begin, and with it came the promise of joy, merriment, and, of course, sweet treats. The fair was famous throughout the county for its delicious confections, from candy floss spun from fine, white sugar to crisp, juicy toffee apples, and even delicate sugar mice that melted in the mouth like snowflakes on the tongue. For young Sherlock, the fair was the highlight of the year, a chance to indulge in his sweet tooth and marvel at the wonders of the world. He eagerly awaited the day of the fair, counting down the hours until the village square was transformed into a riot of color, sound, and aroma. But fate had other plans for young Sherlock. The night before the fair was due to open, disaster struck. A crime had been committed, and one that struck at the very heart of the village's traditions and values. The local sweet shop, which had been preparing for weeks for the fair, had been robbed. The thieves had taken everything, leaving not a crumb or a shred behind. The news spread like wildfire through the village, causing panic and dismay in equal measure. How could this happen? Who could have done such a thing? The shopkeeper, a kindly man named Mr. Wilkins, was beside himself with grief. He had invested all his savings in the fair, hoping to make a decent profit that would see him through the lean months ahead. Now, it seemed, all his hopes had been dashed. It was in this state of gloom and despair that young Sherlock first heard of the crime. He was playing in the village green, throwing a ball to his younger brother Mycroft, when he overheard two men discussing the robbery. Sherlock's ears pricked up at the mention of the sweet shop. He had a sweet tooth like no other, and the thought of a fair without candy floss or toffee apples was simply unthinkable. He listened intently as the men spoke, absorbing every detail of the crime. As the men walked away, Sherlock felt a surge of curiosity and excitement. Here was a mystery, a puzzle to solve, and he was just the person to do it. He had always been fascinated by puzzles and riddles, and had a natural talent for observation and deduction that set him apart from his peers. From that moment on, Sherlock was consumed by the mystery of the missing sweets. He spent every waking moment gathering clues, interviewing witnesses, and piecing together the puzzle. His brother Mycroft watched in bemusement as Sherlock threw himself into his investigation, scribbling notes, drawing diagrams, and muttering to himself in a way that was both alarming and impressive. And so it was that the great Sherlock Holmes, even in his youth, found himself embroiled in a mystery that would test his wits, challenge his ingenuity, and set him on the path to becoming the greatest detective the world had ever known. The evening before the fair was due to open, a great commotion was heard in the quiet streets of the village. Doors were flung open, windows were lit up, and the sound of shouting and crying could be heard in the distance. The villagers ran out of their homes, peering into the darkness to see what could be causing such a stir. Their worst fears were confirmed when they arrived at the sweet shop. The door was hanging off its hinges, and the windows were shattered. Inside, the shop was a scene of utter devastation. Shelves had been emptied, jars had been smashed, and the floor was littered with wrappers and crumbs. Every last sweet treat that had been prepared for the fair was gone, vanished without a trace. The villagers were beside themselves with shock and grief. They had been looking forward to the fair for weeks, and now it seemed that all their hopes and dreams had been shattered. Some wept openly, while others cursed and raged at the injustice of it all. It was clear that the fair could not go ahead without the sweet treats, and that something would have to be done to solve the mystery. It was then that young Sherlock Holmes stepped forward. He had been investigating the crime ever since he had overheard the men talking in the village green, and he had already pieced together several clues that he felt could be of use. He approached Mr. Wilkins, the owner of the sweet shop, and asked if he could examine the scene of the crime. At first, Mr. Wilkins was hesitant. He did not want a mere child poking around in his shop, disturbing the evidence and getting in the way. But something in Sherlock's eyes, a gleam of intelligence and determination, convinced him to let the boy have his way. Sherlock examined the shop with great care and attention to detail. He noticed several things that had been missed by the adults, including a footprint on the floor and a scrap of cloth caught on a jagged piece of glass. He made notes, took measurements, and asked Mr. Wilkins a series of pointed questions. It was clear to everyone present that Sherlock was a boy of great intellect and talent. He had a way of looking at the world that was different from anyone else, and a way of piecing together seemingly unrelated facts that was truly remarkable. The villagers began to whisper amongst themselves, wondering if perhaps the boy might be able to solve the mystery after all. Sherlock, for his part, was not one to give up easily. He felt a fierce determination, a burning desire to prove himself and to solve the crime that had rocked the village to its core. He knew that the sweet treats were not just a matter of frivolous pleasure, but a symbol of something deeper, something that went to the heart of the community's identity and spirit. And so it was that the great Sherlock Holmes, even at his tender age, found himself at the center of a mystery that would test his powers of observation, deduction, and intuition. He would need to call on all his wit and ingenuity to solve the crime, and to restore order and justice to the village he called home. As the night wore on, young Sherlock Holmes continued his investigation into the theft of the sweet treats from Mr. Wilkins' shop. He talked to the villagers, questioned them about their whereabouts at the time of the crime, and pieced together a timeline of events that began to shed some light on the mystery. As he worked, Sherlock could feel the eyes of the village upon him. He knew that he was being watched, and that everyone was waiting to see what he would do next. He could sense the pressure mounting, but he refused to let it get to him. He remained focused, determined, and calm, like a seasoned detective in the face of a difficult case. The next morning, as the sun began to rise over the village, Sherlock was already up and about, examining the scene of the crime once again. He noticed something new, a scrap of paper caught under one of the shelves. He picked it up and studied it, his sharp eyes scanning the writing for any clues. It was then that he noticed something strange about the paper. The ink was smudged, as if it had been written in a hurry, and there was a faint impression on the back of the page, as if something had been pressed against it. Sherlock could feel a thrill of excitement coursing through his veins. He knew that he had just stumbled upon a vital clue. He took the paper to Mr. Wilkins and showed it to him. Mr. Wilkins studied it carefully and then gasped. "This is from my ledger," he said. "It's a list of the people who ordered sweets for the fair. But look at this." He pointed to a smudged name on the list. "This should say Mrs. Smith, but it looks like it's been changed to Mrs. Jones." Sherlock felt a sense of satisfaction wash over him. He knew that he was onto something, and that he was closing in on the culprit. He asked Mr. Wilkins to provide him with a list of all the people who had placed orders for the fair, and then he set to work, examining each name with a fine-toothed comb. As he worked his way through the list, Sherlock began to notice something curious. Several of the names seemed to have been altered or erased, just like the one on the scrap of paper. He marked each of these names with a small tick, and soon he had a short list of suspects, people who had something to gain from the theft of the sweet treats. Sherlock began to investigate each suspect, questioning them about their whereabouts at the time of the crime, and looking for any other evidence that might link them to the theft. He worked tirelessly, barely stopping to eat or sleep, driven by a fierce desire to solve the mystery and bring the culprit to justice. And so it was that young Sherlock Holmes, with his sharp mind, his keen powers of observation, and his unshakable determination, continued to work his way through the rising action of the mystery, drawing ever closer to the moment when he would finally unmask the thief and restore order to the village once and for all. After days of tireless investigation, young Sherlock Holmes had finally narrowed down the list of suspects to just a handful of names. He knew that the thief was among them, and that he was close to cracking the case. On the day of the village fair, the excitement in the air was palpable. The sun shone down on the festivities, and the sounds of laughter and merriment filled the air. But Sherlock had no time for such frivolity. He had a mystery to solve, and he was determined to do it. As he moved through the crowds, he kept his eyes peeled for any sign of suspicious behavior. He noticed a woman buying an unusual amount of sweets, and he followed her discreetly, staying just out of sight. The woman led him to a quiet corner of the fairgrounds, where she met up with a man. They exchanged a few words, and then the woman handed him a bag of sweets. Sherlock watched from the shadows, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that he had found the thief. He stepped out of the shadows, confronting the pair. "I believe you have something that doesn't belong to you," he said, his voice calm and steady. The woman and the man turned to face him, their expressions a mix of surprise and fear. "What do you mean?" the woman asked, trying to hide the bag of sweets behind her back. "I mean that you stole these sweets from Mr. Wilkins' shop," Sherlock replied, "and I have the evidence to prove it." He pulled out the scrap of paper from Mr. Wilkins' ledger and showed it to the woman and the man. "This paper contains a list of all the people who ordered sweets for the fair, but someone altered the name of one of the customers, changing it from Mrs. Smith to Mrs. Jones, and I have reason to believe that you two were involved." The woman and the man exchanged a guilty glance, and then the man spoke up. "All right, you got us," he said. "We needed the sweets for our children's school fair, but we didn't have enough money to pay for them. We thought we could get away with taking them, but we were wrong." Sherlock looked at them sternly. "Stealing is never the answer," he said. "You could have asked for help or found another way to raise the money, but instead, you chose to break the law." He took the bag of sweets from the woman's hands and handed it to Mr. Wilkins, who had arrived on the scene. "I believe these belong to you," he said. Mr. Wilkins looked at Sherlock with gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, young man," he said. "You've done a great service to the village today." Sherlock nodded, feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment wash over him. He had solved the mystery and brought the thief to justice. He knew that this was just the beginning of his adventures and that many more mysteries lay ahead of him. But for now, he was content to bask in the glow of his success and to revel in the knowledge that he had made a difference in the world. With the thief caught and the stolen sweets returned to their rightful owner, the village fair continued without incident. The sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the happy faces of the villagers. As Sherlock made his way back to his family's cottage, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction at having solved the mystery. He knew that this was just the beginning of his career as a detective, and that he had much to learn, but he felt confident in his abilities and his instincts. When he arrived home, he found his parents sitting by the fire, sipping tea and chatting quietly. "Hello, Sherlock," his mother said with a smile. "How was the fair?" Sherlock sat down in his favorite chair and began to recount his adventure. He told them about the missing sweets, the altered ledger, and his ultimate success in catching the thief. His parents listened with rapt attention, marveling at their son's ingenuity and resourcefulness. "You truly are a remarkable boy, Sherlock," his father said, clapping him on the back. "I have no doubt that you will go on to do great things in life." Sherlock smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. He knew that his parents were proud of him, and that meant more to him than anything else in the world. As the night wore on, the family talked and laughed together, enjoying each other's company. They knew that there would be more adventures and more mysteries to solve in the future, but for now, they were content to simply be together. As Sherlock drifted off to sleep that night, his mind was already racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. He knew that the world was full of mysteries, waiting to be uncovered and solved, and he was eager to take on each and every one of them. And so, with a sense of purpose and determination in his heart, young Sherlock Holmes drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For he knew that with his sharp mind and quick wit, he was destined to become one of the greatest detectives the world had ever known. The weeks that followed the village fair passed quickly for Sherlock Holmes. He continued to study and learn, honing his deductive skills and expanding his knowledge in a wide range of subjects. He read every book he could get his hands on, and spent countless hours observing the world around him, always on the lookout for clues and patterns that might help him solve the next mystery. And indeed, there were many mysteries waiting for him in the years that followed. He solved countless crimes, both big and small, and earned a reputation as one of the most skilled detectives of his time. But despite all of his successes, there were moments when Sherlock felt a sense of restlessness. He knew that there was still so much more to learn, so many more mysteries to uncover. And so, with a sense of determination burning inside him, he set out to explore the wider world beyond his village, eager to see what other adventures awaited him. In the years that followed, Sherlock Holmes became a world-renowned detective, traveling to distant lands and solving some of the most complex and challenging cases of his time. He worked closely with law enforcement officials, using his keen powers of observation and deduction to crack cases that had baffled others for years. But despite his fame and success, Sherlock never forgot his roots. He remained humble and dedicated to his craft, always striving to learn more and to do better. He continued to read voraciously, absorbing knowledge from every source he could find, and he never lost his insatiable curiosity for the world around him. And so, as he sat in his study, surrounded by books and artifacts from his many adventures, Sherlock Holmes couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. He had lived a full and remarkable life, one filled with mystery, adventure, and the thrill of discovery. And he knew that his legacy would live on for generations to come, inspiring countless others to follow in his footsteps and to never stop seeking the truth. With a smile on his lips and a sense of contentment in his heart, Sherlock Holmes closed his eyes and let out a sigh of satisfaction, for he knew that, in the end, he had done everything he could to make the world a little bit better, one mystery at a time. And that was all that mattered. That's all for this episode of the Reddit Recap. We hope you enjoyed our coverage of the most interesting and entertaining stories from across the Reddit community. If you have any suggestions for future episodes, or if you just want to share your thoughts on the content we covered today, be sure to leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest videos. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the Reddit Recap.